Picture this for a second. Every single year, literally trillions of dollars flow into Indian markets. I mean, it is a massive, unprecedented wave of capital.
Oh, absolutely massive.
Right. But if you are sitting in a boardroom right now, whether you're a CEO, a CFO, or, an operations head, you've probably felt this fundamental shift in the temperature of the room lately. Investors they're no longer satisfied just looking at your spreadsheets or your profit margin.
Those days are over.
They really are. They're demanding hard, audited numbers on your environmental impact, your supply chain ethics, and, your corporate governance. The rules of capital allocation have changed entirely.
It really is a paradigm shift. I mean, we're moving away from an era where natural and social capital were just, considered external to the balance sheet.
Right.
Institutional investors are now actively pricing climate risk and social equity directly into their valuation models. So if a company can't quantify its sustainability, the market basically views that as a huge unmanaged risk.
Which brings us to the topic of today's deep dive. We are looking at BRSR, or Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting. This is India's mandatory ESG disclosure framework developed by SEBI. We've pulled from regulatory filings, market analyses, and some really fascinating real-world case studies for this one.
Yeah, the source material is incredibly detailed.
It is. So our mission today is to strip away all that jargon and explain exactly what BRSR means for your business, who it affects, and crucially, how to turn this massive compliance mandate into a strategic advantage, complete with, actionable steps.
Love that.
Okay, let's unpack this. Corporate responsibility reports aren't exactly new. For years, companies have been releasing these glossy PDFs with pictures of employees planting trees, right?
Exactly. And those legacy reports were, frankly, very easy for the financial markets to just completely ignore.
Because they were just marketing.
Right. They were essentially marketing materials. So
Yeah.
the evolution really started back in 2009 with the old business responsibility reporting, or BRR. It was well-intentioned, but it lacked teeth. The framework we're dealing with now, the 2021 BRSR mandate, and specifically the 2023 BRSR Core update, is a completely different beast.
Right.
It forces companies to transition from narrative storytelling to rigorous data science.
So let's look at the architecture of that transition. Based on the sources, there are 3 defining pillars that separate BRSR from everything that came before it.
Yep.
The first one is that it is strictly mandatory for the top 1,000 listed companies in India by market capitalization. We're talking about the true heavyweights here.
Right, the Reliances, the TCSs, HDFC Bank, Infosys. For those top 1,000 entities, this is not a voluntary best practice guideline anymore. It's a hard regulatory requirement tied directly to their listing status.
But the second pillar is where I think the real friction lies, which is quantifiable metrics. It feels like SEBI looked at those old, vague claims of, we care about water conservation, and just decided to start demanding the receipts.
Demanding the receipts is the perfect way to phrase it. BRSR eliminates the creative writing aspect of corporate sustainability.
Oh, for sure.
You can't just write a paragraph about your commitment to the environment anymore. The framework demands specific, verifiable data. You have to report your exact megawatt hours of electricity consumed from renewable versus non-renewable sources.
Wow.
Yeah, you have to report the exact cubic meters of water withdrawn from stressed zones, hard metrics on median wages, the percentage of your workforce unionized, even the precise number of consumer data breaches.
So it's basically the equivalent of moving from a creative writing assignment to a rigorous math and science exam where you have to show all your exact work.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is the third pillar, which is global alignment. This ties back to that influx of foreign capital you mentioned earlier. BRSR isn't operating in a vacuum.
Right, it maps to international stuff.
Exactly. Frameworks like the GRI, the TCFD, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It's a critical strategic move by SEBI to ensure the data speaks a universal language.
So an asset manager in London doesn't have to learn a uniquely Indian standard.
Right. They can pull a BRSR report from an Indian tech firm, plug it into their global risk models, and compare it apples to apples with a firm in Germany.
That makes total sense for capital flow. But let's pause and look at the reality for the thousands of businesses that are not in that top 1,000 listed bracket.
This is crucial.
Because if I'm the CFO of, say, a mid-sized unlisted logistics company, my instinct is to just tune this out. I'm not listed, I'm not top 1,000, so this red tape isn't my problem.
And that is the single most dangerous assumption a mid-market executive can make right now. Because even if SEBI isn't regulating you directly, BRSR is going to hit your business through the cascade effect.
Wait, walk us through the mechanics of that cascade. How does a regulation aimed at HDFC suddenly become a crisis for an unlisted vendor?
Well, think about the reporting requirements for those top 1,000 giants. To complete their mandatory BRSR filings, they have to account for the environmental and social footprint of their entire value chain.
Ah, I see.
Right, so if you're that mid-sized auto parts manufacturer and you supply components to a top-tier automotive giant, your emissions, your labor practices, your water usage, they are fundamentally part of their footprint.
So the top 1,000 companies literally cannot fulfill their legal obligations without extracting this data from their supply chain.
Exactly. Procurement departments at these massive corporations are already sending out exhaustive ESG questionnaires to their Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers.
Wow.
If you, as a mid-sized vendor, can't provide that data, you instantly become a compliance liability to your biggest clients. You might not be regulated by SEBI, but you are regulated by your clients' need to comply with SEBI.
And the pressure to get accurate data has been dialed up exponentially with the introduction of BRSR Core for the 23-24 fiscal year. The sources specifically highlight this new mandate for limited assurance, but I want to push back on this a bit.
Okay, sure.
Wait, so limited assurance just means a third-party audit, right? Isn't that just more red tape? I mean, are the big four accounting firms just inventing a new revenue stream here?
Well, look, it might be lucrative for the auditors, yes, but for the companies, it fundamentally alters the risk profile of reporting. Before limited assurance, ESG data was largely self-reported. The temptation to massage the numbers or, selectively highlight the good stuff was incredibly high.
Right.
Limited assurance mandates that independent external professionals verify the data you are publishing. So they are applying the rigor of a financial audit to environmental data.
Okay, so if a CFO claims a 20% reduction in groundwater extraction, an auditor is actually going to check the physical water meters and the utility bills.
Precisely.
All right.
You cannot publish unaudited environmental claims anymore. If a company just guesses their numbers, the auditors will flag it.
Which means business leaders need to know exactly what these auditors will be testing. So let's look at the anatomy of the report. We're looking at 140 questions divided into two buckets.
Yeah, the first bucket is the 98 essential indicators. These are strictly mandatory. They encompass the baseline metrics: energy, greenhouse gases, water usage, waste management.
And social stuff too, right?
Yes, health and safety, diversity and inclusion, board diversity.
And then there's a second bucket, the 42 leadership indicators. Now, these are currently voluntary, but our sources indicate that scoring high here is how you signal leadership to the market and attract ESG-focused investment.
That's the strategic play. The 98 essential indicators keep you compliant, but the 42 leadership indicators are how you secure a competitive advantage.
Now, let's talk about the specific language of these metrics, because for a non-sustainability expert, some of this requires a translation. The framework heavily emphasizes intensity metrics. Why is the focus skewed toward intensity rather than just absolute totals?
Because absolute totals can be highly misleading in a growing economy. If an Indian manufacturing firm doubles its physical output over 5 years, its absolute water consumption is naturally going to rise.
Right, they're just making more stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if an investor only looks at absolute totals, it looks like the company is getting less sustainable. But an intensity metric measures your resource consumption per unit of economic output, like liters of water per million rupees of revenue.
So it measures the efficiency of the growth.
Yes. Alongside intensity, you also have specific social metrics, like verifying your lost time injury frequency rate to ensure your safety policies actually mean fewer workers are getting hurt.
Okay, so assuming listeners know their direct operational footprint, their Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, we have to talk about Scope 3.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Our sources show that Scope 3 emissions, so that's your value chain, supplier emissions, employee commutes, account for like 70 to 90% of a company's total footprint.
It's staggering. It is the single biggest hurdle in the entire BRSR framework. Scope 3 forces you to take responsibility for carbon emissions that occur entirely outside your physical control.
Meaning you're not just responsible for your factory's smokestack, but your supplier's delivery trucks.
Exactly. Given the sheer friction of gathering that data from hundreds of partners, it's no surprise companies are stumbling.
So how are they failing?
There are 5 common mistakes. Mistake number 1, treating BRSR as just a checklist rather than a strategic opportunity.
Right, just trying to tick the boxes.
Exactly. Which leads to mistake number 2, data silos. ESG data is scattered across HR, finance, and operations.
Everyone has a different spreadsheet.
Yes. Mistake number 3 is having incomplete Scope 3 data, Mistake 4 is waiting until the last minute for third-party assurance.
You can't just hand it over the day before it's due.
No, you cannot. And mistake number 5, which is huge, greenwashing. Making claims without data, which regulators can now easily spot because of the audits.
So what's the action plan? What should our listeners do right now?
There's a 5-step guidance plan. Step 1, conduct a BRSR readiness assessment and map your gaps immediately.
Find out what you don't know.
Right. Step 2, build a centralized ESG data collection system. Invest in software for scalability. Get out of those spreadsheets.
Okay, step 3.
Start the Scope 3 inventory now. Supplier data takes months to gather. Don't wait. Step 4, engage a third-party assurer early. Involve them during data collection, not at the deadline.
Catch the errors in Q1, not Q4.
Exactly. And step 5, if we connect this to the bigger picture, integrate ESG directly into your core business strategy for long-term value.
But wait, implementing these 5 steps sounds like a massive investment of time and capital. Why should a CFO prioritize this over traditional growth metrics?
Because the ROI is real. Companies integrating ESG strategically aren't just complying, they are transforming. Look at the real outcomes from our sources.
Right, there were some great examples.
Yeah, a manufacturing company achieved a 35% carbon reduction in just 18 months because the BRSR gap analysis forced them to find inefficiencies in their heating and cooling cycles.
Which permanently lowers their operating expenses. That drops straight to the bottom line.
Exactly. And on the capital side, an IT startup secured $2 million in ESG-focused funding because they had verified, audited data on those leadership indicators.
Wow, so those who treat it strategically will lead the market, and the checklist crowd will just be playing catch-up.
That's the reality of the market right now.
Let's quickly summarize this journey. BRSR is mandatory, it's quantifiable, and it's globally aligned. It affects you whether you're top 1,000 or just in their supply chain. Success means abandoning that checklist mentality, mastering your Scope 3 data, and integrating ESG into your core strategy.
Absolutely. And I want to leave listeners with this core philosophy. Clean air should be a public right, not a privilege. Similarly, sustainability shouldn't be a luxury for large corporations. It should be accessible, actionable, and value-creating for companies of all sizes.
I love that. So here's a final thought for you to mull over.
Okay.
What if your company's most powerful competitive advantage next year isn't a new product or service, but the radical transparency of your ESG data? Are you ready to be audited on your impact? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Start that readiness assessment today.